All right, so now it has been imported, and if I just increase the size of this, and if I just press Control on my keyboard, and if I scroll down, you're going to see that the size is becoming smaller. That's just so that we can see more items. And if I just scroll down, you're going to see that we have all our meshes. So now how exactly do we import all of these? Just select the first one and just go to the end and just select the last one. Just press Shift and select the last one. And what's going to happen is that if I just drag this in, you can see that we're going to have this whole, what do you call it? Yeah, the whole apartment. And now this is going to take some time. All right. Okay. So one problem immediately which I'm noticing is that our what do you call it, this basically the whole structure is not UV unwrapped properly, and that is why we're seeing this texture stretching, right? The textures are not being applied properly. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be actually, one thing which I can do is that I can simply, yeah, so what I'm going to do is that I'm just trying to inspect, and I'm trying to see if we have any other problems as well, but I don't think we have any. Everything seems pretty fine. All right. Yeah, so the only problem which you have is this structure. So I'm just going to go back to Blender, and I'm going to be exporting the just the structure once again, and we're going to be replacing that. All right. So yeah, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting this structure, and I'm going to press Control A, and that is just going to apply the transformations. Now, if I just go to this item menu, you're going to see that the scale has not been applied. That's why when we were UV unwrapping it, it wasn't doing it properly. So I'm just going to press Control A, apply scale. Or you can just do all transformations, but it doesn't matter because everything else is at the default. Now if I just press tab to go into edit mode, press A to select everything, U to go into the UV mapping mode, and simply smart UV project, and okay. All right, now what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to select this structure, and I'm just going to go to file, export FBX, and I can just export it as apartment structure, and make sure that it's limited to selected objects. So I'm just going to go to the models menu, apartment SS, and I'm going to be exporting this, just that. You can obviously export everything again, but that's just going to be a waste of time and waste of resources. So I would not recommend you to do that. Now to actually import this, what I'm going to do is that I'm firstly going to go to top view, so that we can place it precisely exactly where we want it to. And so I'm just going to create a new folder. I'm going to name it structure. And so I'm just going to browse to where I exported that, and I'm just going to be dragging this inside right here. Import all, and I think that should be fine. All right, so now it is right here, and I'm just going to be importing this. I'm just going to be dragging it, and you should try to make it roughly the same position. If it's slightly off, then it doesn't really matter that much, but however, I would recommend you to try to make it pretty similar. And then just select the one which was what do you call it, the one which was there before. I think it was, yeah, it's this one right here. Select that and delete it. Right, so now one problem which I'm noticing is that well, one problem which we have fixed is the fact that this texture is no longer being stretched. It's perfectly fine. So that problem is fixed. However, it is a little up. It is basically it's not grounded. So I'm just going to go to the left view, for example, and I'm just going to move this down. Something like that should be good. Let me just go back to perspective mode. And now before anything, I'm just going to create a floor for this, because right now it looks very weird and we can't really do anything. So what I'm going to do for that is that I'm simply going to go to add shapes, and I'm going to add a cube. I'm just going to go down. Let me just scale it down in the z-axis. Something like that should be good. And let me just bring it down. I'm just going to try. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to be reducing the camera speed because the camera is way too fast right now. So let me just turn off. Actually, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the left view, and I'm going to make sure that it's grounded with everything. So I'm just going to turn off the snapping so that I can precisely make the adjustments. I think something like that should be good. Yes, if I just move it along, you're going to see that it looks pretty good. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going back to the perspective mode, and I'm going to be scaling it up. Actually, I can just go to the top view for this. Just go to the top view, and I'm going to be scaling it up just in the X and the Y axis, not in the Z axis, because obviously we don't need to do that. I'm just going to scale it up something like that. Maybe even move it just like that. And I'm just going to scale it up a little more. Now, the reason why I'm not just scaling it up in the X-axis is because if I do that, the texture is going to become stretched. So I just wanted this, basically I want this to be uniform. I want the UV projection to be uniform. And so that's why I would recommend you to do the same exact thing as well. All right, so now our, if I just increase the camera speed slightly, you're going to see that our floor is done. However, now the problem is that we don't have a sky, we don't have a ceiling. And so for that, simply what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating this. Press Alt on your keyboard and just bring it up. Something like that. So let me just go back to the left mode, left view. And so that I can properly place this. Something like that should be good. Now, yes, this light is not on, this light is not basically attached to the ceiling. And this fan is extruding out as well. So we're going to be fixing that later on. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so one thing which I'm noticing is that inside this apartment, everything is very dark, isn't it? So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to be adding I'm going to go inside this visual effects menu, and I'm going to be adding a post process volume. Now what this is going to do is that we can basically add effects to our scene with this. So the first one which I'm going to do, the first setting which I'm going to take is if I just search infinite, and you're going to see this infinite extent. Now I'm going to turn this on because otherwise it will only affect it will only affect the scene when we're inside this volume, and if you just turn on the setting, it's going to affect the whole scene. So that's something which we want. And now the exposure, I'm going to set the exposure mode to manual. So just check the setting and set it to manual. And the exposure compensation, I'm going to increase it because right now it's way too dark. So if I just set it to something like 13, and now if I just go inside my room, you're going to see that, actually I'm just going to make it, I'm going to increase it a little bit. Right now you're going to see that the lighting is absolutely trash, and it's very dark, and for some reason there's fog inside our home, which is definitely looks very wrong, and we're going to have to fix that. Right, so what I'm going to do to fix that is firstly I'm going to go actually one thing which I'm going to do before that is that I'm going to be selecting all these assets, the meshes, and I'm just going to be, yeah, let me just select this last one, shift select them, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press this button right here, so it's going to create a new folder. I'm going to name it meshes, so that I can just simply collapse it all and I can easily work around with these settings. So what I'm going to do is that firstly I'm going to go to the skylight, make sure that it is movable. In some situations it's going to be static, which is not going to look that great. Now the reason why it looks good right now is because, well, it's not working properly. Just set it to movable, and then after you've set it to movable, just turn on this real-time capture. Make sure that this is turned on, otherwise it's not going to look very realistic. And I'm going to see that our scene looks pretty bright and it looks pretty good. So yeah, one thing, if your scene is not actually looking like this, the reason for that is you might not have ray tracing turned on. So you can just go to edit, project settings, go to search for ray tracing, and actually my ray tracing is also not turned on. So if I just turn it on, ray traced shadows, skylight, and LOD. So right now it's okay, so basically to activate ray tracing, I'm gonna have to restart this. So just save all, and I'm gonna restart it. Otherwise, I mean, if this is the result without ray tracing, then I feel like it looks pretty good anyway, doesn't it? Alright, so I have turned on ray tracing and I did restart the project. So you're gonna see it's not that big of a difference. If I just go to edit, project settings, and if I just turn ray tracing off, you're gonna see that it does become a little bright from some areas. However, it's not that big of a deal. However, when we add materials, this difference might be exaggerated a little bit. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's start with adding the materials, because the lighting right now honestly seems pretty good. If I just, for example, go to this bathroom is pretty dark. So we're going to be working here. And this bedroom looks pretty good. So yeah, basically I just want to have, basically you have two choices, right? One choice is to have this sort of, this sunlight effect right here. Or you can just, if I just go ahead and move the sunlight to wherever I can easily rotate it. Yeah, so either you can have this sunlight effect right here, or you can have it in the living room. So if I just rotate it like that, you're gonna see you can get this effect if you want as well. All right, or you can have the sunlight from here as well. I'm just gonna show you sort of like that. Yeah, so it basically depends on the kind of look you're going for, but I think this looks fine for now. One problem which we're noticing right now is, I'm just gonna update this and restart later. Yeah, so one problem which you're noticing right now is that we have fog inside the house, which is obviously not correct. We should not have fog inside the house. And so if I just turn this exponential height far off, you're gonna see that it's gonna go away. However, if I just turn it off, you're gonna see that this becomes black as well, which is not something we want. We want the fog to be outside the house, but outside the apartment, but not inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the start distance, and I'm going to be increasing it to any value above like sort of 2000, something like that. Just make it maximum. So what's going to happen is that basically fog just starts way behind the apartment, and it doesn't look that bad. Okay, right, so this looks pretty good as well. And yeah, so basically this sunlight effect doesn't really look that good right here, so I'm just going to be rotating it slightly, maybe something like that. Or actually I'm just going to have it in the bedroom because I think this looks pretty good. Yeah, maybe a tad bit. Maybe we can just move this right there so that it's easier for us to move it, and it's so that it's easier for us to rotate it. Something like that seems to be good. Perfect. All right, so now let's start with the texturing, and then we're going to be tweaking the lighting as we go. So for the texturing, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using Megascans, which is a library of assets which comes with Unreal Engine 5. So I'm going to be showing you how to use that. And apart from that, I'm also going to be using a texture pack. Now, if I just go to Epic Games Launcher, so Epic Games Launcher is basically the launcher which you used to download Unreal Engine. So I'm pretty sure you have it. And just go inside that, wait for it to load. Alright, so once you're in this, you just go to Unreal Engine, and you can go to, actually, you just go to the marketplace. And so once you're in the marketplace, you can just search for automotive materials. Now, what exactly is the automotive material library? Basically, these are materials which are made for cars. However, they seem to work pretty good on interiors as well, because they have all sorts of, for example, like these fabrics, leathers and everything like that. They have metals, they have wood, and they basically have all materials which you want, which you could want in almost all of them in an interior. The only thing that they don't have is marbles, and marbles we can use, we can import from Quixel Megascans. So I'm just going to be right now cut. Now I have cut. Now I have already downloaded this, so it just shows add to project for me, but for you it should say download or something like that. But once you have downloaded it, then you can just add to project, press add to project, and then just select a project which you want to add it to, add to project, and it should do that. So the download size is, I think it is 2.9 gigabytes, but this is the cache size, so it might be slightly less than that. The download size might be slightly less than that. And so for the floor, for the wooden floor, you basically have two options. Either you can just use a wooden floor material from Megascans, which I think, in my opinion, looks better than the other option which I'm about to show you. However, you also have another option, which is this. What do you call it? Basically, I'm just going to search for wood floor and press select this free option right here, and you're going to see this material pack right here. You have a lot of these woods, so if you can if you want this sort of wood, then you can definitely use that as well. And yeah, I did download these and I did use them in one of my projects. However, I prefer the Megascans ones. So yeah, these are going to be the two. Yeah, so basically we just need automotive materials, and apart from that, yeah, one thing which we're going to be downloading, one other basically model pack which we're going to be downloading is going to be the, if I just search for it, chairs and tables. So just simple as that. Chairs and tables, search free. Just okay, so I think I typed something wrong. Maybe it was Twinmotion. It should come up. Yeah, this one right here, Twinmotion chairs and tables pack. Yeah, so it has this and symbol instead of the actual and which I typed previously. Yeah, so this is basically a collection of tables and chairs, as the name suggests, and you can use them in your projects. These are really good tables and chairs, so yeah, I'm just going to be adding them to this project as well. add a project. And once you actually add these material packs or the model packs inside this Unreal Engine 5, what you're going to see is that you're going to see these folders right here. So for example, we have this automotive materials folder, and we have this TM chairs and tables pack, right? So firstly, let me just add the chairs and tables, then we can move on to the next step, which is going to be to actually start texturing. So I'm just going to be go inside this chairs and tables pack, and you can just go inside the chairs first. Let me just go inside the tables first, and let's just add a coffee table right here. So you're gonna see this table right here. I'm just gonna be pressing Control on my keyboard and pressing and just scrolling up so that the size of this increases. And now we can just press the down key to keep looking at these, and you can just import the one which you like. So a lot of these are really good. However, I'm looking for something a little more modern style. Maybe something like that seems to be good. How about that? Or maybe let me just keep searching. Maybe we'll find something better. Alright, so actually never mind, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to be using this one right here because I think this the shape of this is really nice. However, there are many options, so you can choose whichever one you want. But for me, I'm gonna choose this one right here. So let me just select this and delete that, and I'm just going to be importing this. So now this is wooden. However, I want this to be marble. I want this to be made out of marble, so we're just going to be changing the texture on this. Yeah, so it is placed correctly, I think. Yeah, make sure that it's actually touching the ground. Yeah, so perfect. All right, so now let's start. Now let's actually add the other chairs and tables which we were supposed to add. So I'm just gonna go to chairs now. Maybe we can. Now, obviously, when deciding these chairs and tables, obviously, I would recommend you to actually spend a lot of time on these and just try to see what you like the best and try to understand which one goes with your scene. But for me, I'm just going to choose this one. I'm going to choose the exact same chairs and tables which I did for the previous project, the one which I showed you at the beginning. However, I would actually recommend you to go for something different. Yeah, so for the dining table, I'm not exactly sure which one I chose, but I think I need something a little high. Maybe something like that. Yeah, I think I chose that one previously as well. All right, perfect. So I'm just going to place that right there, and let me just move this chair. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be actually duplicating this, but before that, let me just rotate it slightly, because obviously in real life, chairs are not perfectly placed. They're not perfectly aligned with everything, so we just want to add some of that realism here. You can just play around with this. Make sure that nothing is intersecting. It's pretty close to intersecting, so I'm just going to move it back. All right, perfect. And I'm just going to be pressing Alt and duplicating this right like that. And I'm going to be rotating this like that, 180 degrees. And let me just place them right here. Perfect. So one thing which you can do is that you can actually select all of these, and you can actually rotate them, place them like that, which I think looks better. And I'm going to be doing that. So the position, I'm just going to adjust that. Something like that should be good. Perfect. All right, so our living room is basically complete, and I'm not exactly sure what else we were supposed to add. Yeah, we were supposed to add these chairs and tables right here. Yeah, one thing which I just remembered was doors. So obviously we didn't add any doors right now. We don't have any doors right now in our scene. But in the actual scene we did have doors. So we're going to be adding them. We're going to be importing them later on. The reason why I did not import them right now is because obviously we want to be we want to move we want to move easily between the rooms, and we want to see how they look. So that's why I feel like importing the doors later on is the best choice. All right, so for this, I'm just gonna select. Let me just actually select table first. Let me select a table which is down, something like that. No, that's way too large. Something which is small, a small coffee table. Maybe that. That could be cool. How about that? Never mind. Yeah, so I'm actually going to go with this one. However, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be changing the size of this. So I'm just going to be scaling it down in the z-axis, something like that, and scaling it up in the x and y axis. Something like that should be good. Maybe like that. I'm just going to be turning off the scaling, the snapping and the scaling. And I think that seems to be pretty good. So now we can just move on to adding the chairs. Let me just add these right here. Rotate them like that. And then we can actually, let me just rotate it a little more, something like that, and then I can just duplicate it and place it right there. Yeah, so I'm just trying to create some sort of, some sort of non-uniformity to add that believability, add that extra layer of believability. Now, obviously, this looks a little smaller and it looks a little congested, so you could probably reduce the size of this bed, or you could simply remove these if you want. Yeah, so that's another option you have. However, I'm going to leave that to you. It's your choice. And so, yeah, the ceiling fan is a little too low, so I'm just going to be selecting that, and let me just move it up. Something like that. You can duplicate this, you can copy this and add it to other rooms as well. However, actually I am going to do that probably. But then where am I going to add this one? Anyway, so we're going to be deciding that later on. All right, so now let's move on to adding the textures. So for the textures, we're going to be using this automotive materials library. However, before that, let me just add the texture for this wooden floor. So for that, we're going to be using Megascans. Now, if I just go to add, and if I just go to add Quixel content, you're going to see that it's going to open this new window called Bridge. Now, what Bridge is that in Unreal Engine 4, it used to be a separate app which you would actually download to import assets from Megascans into Unreal Engine 4. However, this Bridge app is actually built into, my bad, actually, never mind. Yeah, this Bridge app is actually built into Unreal Engine 5, so you can just import assets from Megascans exactly directly inside of Unreal Engine 5. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be searching for Marble, and you can just select any of these. Alternatively, what you can do, and in fact I would recommend you to do that, is simply just go to this menu right here, go to services, and just go down to and select Marble. And I'm going to see all sorts of marble which this has. However, right now I'm going to search for wood because I want a wooden floor. So yeah, so this one right here, in my opinion, is the best looking one. You could choose this one as well. You could obviously choose this one as well. These are wooden planks. However, they look a little old. So if you're going for that vibe, then by all means go for it. But right now, this wooden floor does the job. All right, so what I'm going to do is that to actually apply the material, it's pretty simple. Just drag it right here and it's applied. I'm just going to be decreasing the size of that. By the way, another way to decrease the size is by going to settings and thumbnail size. You can just select the options right here. So right now, one problem which I'm noticing is that the tiling size is way too high. So basically, this texture is being projected correctly. It's the dimensions are correct, but the size is way too large. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be opening this texture and this material. Actually, they're called materials. And inside this tiling / offset, I'm going to check that, and I'm going to be opening it. And basically, the higher the value of these tiling X and Y, the smaller the material is going to appear on your object, because it's going to be tiling that many times. So right now it's just tiling one time. So if I just set it to 2 and 2, you're going to see that is now it's tiling 2 times, which I think is fine. Or I can try 2.5. I think 2.5 is fine. Yeah. So here you have other controls for this material as well. So for example, if you want to make it shiny, then you can do that. You can just select this maximum roughness and you can reduce it. And you're going to see it's going to become very shiny. Something like that. Yeah, I think that looks really good. However, if you are not using ray tracing, yeah, this is a really important tip for you guys. If you're not using ray tracing, then I would highly recommend you to actually stay away from these basically these shiny materials and try to use as less reflections as you can, because as we're going to see in just a bit, ray tracing is really important if you want really accurate reflections. Yeah, so even when ray tracing is turned on in Unreal Engine 5, you're going to see this noise right here. This problem right here is not going to be there if I just turn the roughness up. So yeah, generally I prefer having obviously glossy things do look better in many circumstances. However, whenever you can, try to avoid the glossy material and try to have the matte material, because that's just gonna look better inside of Unreal Engine 5. But anyways, moving on to the next material, we have to add a material to the walls because the walls don't look good right now. So I'm just going to go back to add Quixel content. Let's just go back to bridge. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to be searching for, let me try searching for wall. You sometimes have to spend some time looking for the right assets in Megascans, but oftentimes you do find really good assets. So this looks pretty good. Fresh wall plaster, and even this one looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna go with, yeah, maybe we can like try going into the surfaces, this menu, and then we can search for plaster or something like that. Yeah, so you have all these options. If you want something a little more rough, so you can go with this. But I think I'm gonna go with, let me just go with something clean. Never mind, I'm just gonna search for wall and I'm just gonna use this one, which came first. Was it this one? I think it was this one, yeah. So you can just select medium quality or any quality which you want. Obviously, the higher the quality, the more performance cost it's gonna come with. So if you don't have that strong of a computer, or you're just doing a hobby project and quality doesn't really matter that much for you, then obviously I would recommend you to go for lower quality. Right. So once you've downloaded it, you can just simply apply it to the walls. And right now the problem which we're facing is that, again, the scale is way too high, which is the same problem which we faced with this ground, this what do you call it, the floor. Right, so what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to be opening this material, and we can just increase the tiling. How about 3 by 3? Make sure you set the value of both of these to the same value, otherwise the texture is going to stretch. So for example, if I set this to 3 and if I set this to 1, you're going to see that it looks very stretched in the y-axis. So that's why I would highly recommend you to set both of them to the same value. 3 is way too big. How about 5? I think that is better. However, I'm just going to go with something like 8, because I think that's just going to make it look a lot better. All right, perfect. Because obviously we don't need to see the details in the walls unless we just go very close to them, right? So I think 8 is going to be is going to be the sweet spot, right? Also, you have other options in this as well. So you can even change the albedo tint, so you can change the color of the walls. This is something which I would recommend you to set it to. I'm going to set it to something like a dark gray-ish thing, because I think that looks pretty good. Apart from that, you have other controls. For example, if you want to decrease the roughness for some reason, which I would not recommend you to do at all, or you can increase the normal strength. The normal strength is basically going to make it look more rough. So if you're going for this kind of look, then you can definitely go for that. However, I'm just going to set everything to default because I think that looks pretty good. Again, just save everything and let's move on to the next material. But before that, one thing which we're noticing right now is that we're seeing this grid here, and that is pretty distracting for us, right? So I'm simply going to go up to the show menu, and in the show menu, you can just turn this grid off, and you're going to see the grid's no longer going to be there, and that just looks better in my opinion. It's easier for us to work that way. Right. So basically the roof as well, I'm just going to apply the same exact material of the wall to the roof as well, and I think we are basically looking pretty good. Now let's start with the sofas. So for the sofas, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to go to this automotive material library, and from here we can just go inside the materials menu, materials folder, and then you have two categories, right? You have one category is exterior. So obviously this is made for cars, so you have materials which would be on the exterior of the car, and then you have interior. So inside the interior menu we have this textile folder, and inside here you're going to see you're going to find all sorts of fabric materials. So if I just apply this one, you're going to see that it looks pretty good, doesn't it? One problem which we are facing right now is that this texture is way too small for our liking, so it's tiling way too much. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be increasing the UV tiling. Now obviously this is a separate material pack, it's not from Megascans, so the settings are going to be slightly different. So right now you're going to see that this setting we have this setting right here. Instead of 20, I'm just going to set it to 15. How about that? I think that looks better. Maybe how about 10? I think that 10 is better. Yeah, I think 10 is fine. All right, cool. So, or maybe even, yeah, actually, I'm just gonna go with 15 because 10 seems to be way too large. But again, you have full creative control over this. It's your choice. You can just set it to whatever you want. You can even try these other materials. You can just choose whichever one you want. You can even go for something a little more glossy, like this leather. And for example, if you want something, if you want to make these sofas out of leather, then you can do that as well by simply going to this leather menu, leather folder, and you can just apply a leather material to this, which I honestly think this looks much better. Yeah, so I'm going to make it out of leather actually. How about a brown leather? That just blends in with the floor too much, so I'm not going to use that. You can go with this, these, what do you call it? Perforated. Yeah, I think that's what it's called, perforated leathers. So basically these have holes. But I'm not exactly liking that. You can even go with this sort of a look. I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Okay, so yeah, basically you have a lot of these options and you can just go with whichever one you think looks the best. I'm just gonna go with this one because I think that looks pretty good. But obviously I would highly recommend you to not copy my layout and not copy my design. I would recommend you to go with your own design. So I'm just gonna give that cloth this texture, this material, brown suede. And for these cushions, we can probably give them a beige leather. Actually, I don't want the cushions to be made out of leather. So I'll just, oops, my bad. Maybe I'll just give them this sort of texture. I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? We can probably try others as well. However, I want to leave this on you guys because I want you guys to be creative and I want you guys to be sort of, I want you guys to exercise your own creative instincts. Yeah, actually, I think that looks better. Yeah, so these pillows, I'm just gonna give them that color. And let me just change this cloth then because it blends in too much. I'm just gonna give it this material. Or maybe not. Um, maybe something like, I think that's fine, yeah. Right. Okay, so we are done with this these sofas as well. Now let's move on to this table. This table, we're gonna give it a marble texture. But for that marble texture, first I'm just gonna close this one, and I'm just gonna go to add Quixel content, and we can simply click this home menu, go to surface, go down to marble, and then we can just download any sort of marble which we want from here. Now I did previously download some marbles as well, so if you want to access any assets which you have previously downloaded, then you can just click this button right here and it's going to take you to your local Megascans library, and you're going to see all the materials, all the assets which you have already downloaded. So I'm just going to be using one from here. Yeah, I think one of these should be good. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding all of them in my scene. So after that, because I've already downloaded it, right? So it doesn't come with any cost for me. If you had to, let's say, download all of them manually, then obviously it would be time consuming, and that's something you have to think about. However, I have already downloaded them, so I'm just going to import all of them and I'm going to try all of them and I'm going to see which one looks the best. All right, so I think that should be enough. Okay, so we have all these marbles right here. Let's start with this one. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. However, before moving on to this table, first let me just add a material to this carpet so that it doesn't look white and it looks really terrible right now. I'm just simply gonna apply a simple carpet material to this, or you can apply some other one as well. How about that one? The problem with this is that again, the scale is way too high, so I'm just gonna be reducing the scale, and let's see how it looks after that. Go down. Let me just make it 20 by 20. I'm not really liking that, to be honest. Something like that seems to be good. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go with that, I think. Yeah, let me just go with that. All right, so this is way too, yeah, so the problem with this is that it's way too detailed. I want this to be simple, this table to be simple, and I don't want it to have that much detail. So I'm just gonna go back to Megascans and we can try applying more of them. This one looks pretty good. And I don't necessarily like that. Well, this is not the material which we want to apply. Nope. That looks interesting. That looks pretty cool, doesn't it? It just goes in with the whole vibe of the scene. Nope. I think that looks pretty good as well, doesn't it? So what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to go with, oops, something like this. Yeah, this coffee marble looks really good. So I'm just going to go with that. All right. So one thing which we can try is we can try probably pushing this up a little bit so that we're seeing a little more of those shadows, because previously when it was intersecting too much, we weren't really seeing any shadows as such, right? So we want shadows, yeah. All right, perfect. Right, so the scene is coming along pretty well and it looks pretty realistic, doesn't it? This would be a nice time to save your project because again, I don't want you to lose your progress. Now let's move on to this. So I don't really like these legs because they're very reflective. And as I mentioned earlier, reflective surfaces, especially if you're not using ray tracing, don't really work that well in Unreal Engine 5. So I would prefer adding something a little more matte. Um, so what I'm going to do is that you can probably add a metal, a more matte styled metal. That's way too bright. We can try adding a wood texture to this as well. Something like that. I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, that looks pretty good. And we can add a light wood to this as well. Actually, the one which it already had, which it originally had, was better. So I'm just going to leave it right there. We can try adding something else to this. I think this one's fine. Anyway, so now we can move on to, let me just add a material to this light. And so firstly, I'm going to place this light property. Yeah, one thing which you're going to be noticing right now is that if I just look at this light from the top, you're going to see that it's actually transparent. It doesn't have any material, and that is why, that is because of the faces are oriented towards the bottom, right? If you remember, I showed you in Blender that the top portion of this light was red. So all materials which basically have their normals inverted are going to be are not going to have any material in Unreal Engine 5 mostly. So yeah, that's why it's important to make sure that the side of a mesh which is going to be facing your audience should have the blue side of the face orientation. And that is why, yeah, that's just a thing to keep in mind. And so, let me just select all these items. I think it's just one item, isn't it? Yeah, it's just one item. Anyway, so I'm just going to be going to the left view, and let me just place it so that it's intersecting with the wall, something like that. Intersecting with the ceiling, my bad. I think that's fine. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is that let me just add a material to this. So we can probably add something. Let me just add a fabric, something like that. Oops, not my bad. Control Z. I'm just going to add a fabric right here. And we are going to be adding a light later on. So don't worry about that. I think that should look good. Yeah, and actually let me just add the light right now. So I'm just going to go to this menu right here, and we can just simply go to lights and point light. And then I'm just going to drag it in, move it down, move it in our scene. And obviously it's going to be way too harsh at the beginning, but don't worry about that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to be, let me just go to the top view and let me place it so that it's right in the middle of this light. Now let me just go to the perspective mode. And yeah, one thing which I'm going to be doing now is that I'm going to be increasing the source radius of this, because the higher the source radius is, basically the larger your light source is. And the larger the light source is, the softer your shadows are. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And if say you you want this you want the size of this source to be this much, but your shadows are way too harsh, so you can increase the soft source radius, and your shadows are going to become slightly more soft. Yeah, so you can even adjust the length of the source, which is not something I'm interested in doing. I think something like that should be good, and I'm just going to move it down. I think that should be a good source height, source radius. However, the intensity is way too high. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be just decreasing the intensity to, I don't know, I think 1. 1 seems to be fine. Actually, let me try 0.5. I think that's going to be enough. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be actually moving this up. Or not, maybe. Let me try decreasing the source radius. I think that's fine because now it looks that the light is actually coming out of this fabric, which in my opinion looks pretty good. I think that should be fine. All right, so now if say you want to get rid of this icon, this widget, because it can be a little more, what do you call it, a little distracting sometimes. So you can just press G on your keyboard and it's going to get rid of everything. You can look at your scene exactly the way your viewers are going to see it. Right, so let me just press G again so that it's visible. And I'm going to be increasing the soft source radius a little bit because the shadows are pretty harsh, aren't they? We can probably increase the source radius too. Maybe something like that. Because I'm not really liking the harsh shadows right there. So we can probably decrease the intensity to 0.2. Yeah, I think that's better. Yeah, 0.2 is better. All right, perfect. Let me just press G to hide that. Okay, now let's move on to our next step, which is going to be to texture this kitchen. All right, so for the kitchen, what I'm going to do is I want it to be made out of marble. So I'm just going to go back to my Megascans library. Let me just collapse this automotive materials, and let me just add something like that to just get a feel of how it looks. I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that marble is really nice. One thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be increasing the minimum roughness so that it's not that shiny. Something like that should be good because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily like things to be that shiny in my scenes because, firstly, it doesn't look that realistic in my opinion, and secondly, yeah, in Unreal Engine 5, things don't look that realistic if they're shiny. And that, again, is just my opinion. You can disagree with that. However, I prefer my scenes to be matte. Anyways, so just save your project again. And all right, now let's start applying the marble materials to all these. So we can probably apply that. Actually, I'm just going to apply this material to all of these countertops and these cupboards. Okay, so I think that should be good enough. Now let's just apply a good material to these handles. So what I'm going to do for that is that I'm going to go back to automotive material library, and I'm going to go down to exterior, and this time I'm going to go down to metal, and we can just apply something like a brushed metal material to this, which I think looks pretty good. Or we can apply something like that. I think that looks more realistic. So I'm just going to apply that. Now this can be a little tedious. Obviously you have to apply it to every single handle manually. But you have to just get done with it to move on. All right, I think that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah. Let me just get done with these at the top as well. Oops, my bad. And we might actually have to add a light to this kitchen as well because it's pretty dark in here, isn't it? Yeah, so let me just get done with this first. What exactly is this thing? I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, okay, so this box right here, I think it's just yeah, it's basically for the Boolean modifier in Blender. But since we've already imported it inside of Unreal Engine, I think we can just get rid of it. That I don't think was the Boolean modifier. Anyways, yeah, so I'm just gonna be adding again, I'm gonna be adding a metal material to these to make them look realistic. And I think they do look quite realistic. However, this doesn't look good, so I think we're good, yeah. One thing which I'm going to be doing is that let me just duplicate this light right here so that I can actually see what's going on in the kitchen. Okay, so for some reason this, yeah, so one problem which we're noticing right now is that the sink, the normals of the sink are actually flipped. They're not correctly placed. So obviously if you're doing this inside of Blender, before importing this from Blender, I want you to make sure that your normals for the sink are not actually inverted. So I'm just going to open Blender and let me just see if we're actually correct. I'm just going to go in there. Okay, so they're not actually flipped. So what is the problem? Okay, so for some reason they're a little the shade of blue is a little different. So we can probably try to recalculate the normals. Tab to go into edit mode, A, select everything, mesh, normals, recalculate outside, and it didn't really do anything, right? So for some reason, this doesn't seem to work correctly. Let me try adding some other material. Maybe it's related to the material. All right, so I'm not exactly sure what the problem is, but one thing which you can do is that if something like this happens, if a glitch like this happens, then what you can do is you can simply just go into BlenderKit and you can just search for sync. And you can just add a separate sync in your scene, and you can just export that and import that into Unreal Engine. Yeah, so that is one option which you have. I'm not sure why, but again, BlenderKit is not working for some reason. Yeah, so these glitches, sometimes they do happen, and BlenderKit sometimes does not connect to its servers for some reason. So it is searching, it says it's searching. But anyways, you get the point, right? So you can just import a separate sync and you can just add it in place of this. But for this tutorial, I'm not going to do that because yeah, my job is just to show you how to do things. Exactly what to do, that is up to you, right? All right, so I'm just going to add this material to this, not this one. I think it was, yeah, this one. All right, so let's move on to the next part, which is going to be, so we're at this point, we're just adding materials to all the items in our scene. And let me add a marble material to this, what do you call it? Cup. So basically it's ceramic, but we don't really have a ceramic material right now. So I'm just going to be adding a plain white marble. I think that's pretty plain. Yeah, I think that's going to be good enough. All right, so apart from that, let me add a metal material to this knife. Now, I would highly recommend you to actually take your time in this part and actually spend a lot of time adding the materials, because otherwise what's going to happen is that if your materials are not that well made or that well applied, sort of, then it won't really look that good. So I would highly recommend you to spend some time on this and just think about what materials you want to apply. Now this, I'm not exactly sure which material should be applied to this. Let me just try adding a wood material to this. Oh, that looks trash. Yeah, I think something like that. It actually does look like a cookie, sort of. So I'm just going to be leaving it with that. Now, nobody will know that it's wood, but I think it looks fine. All right, so next up we have these plates. So I'm just going to be adding material to these plates and then to these cups. I'm going to be adding a different marble to this so that to create some sort of non-uniformity, if that makes sense. How about something like that? Never mind. Yeah, I think we're good. All right, so obviously now this light looks really unrealistic and it looks very bad. So we are going to be working on the lighting of this scene of this kitchen later on. However, for now, I think we're good to go because yeah, I think the materials are applied and I think we're good to go. Now for this, I'm going to apply a white plastic material to this. I hope we do have a white plastic. We have a silver plastic, but we can fix that. Don't worry about that. So what we're going to be doing is that we're simply going to be opening this material and we're going to be changing the tint to be a little more white. And yeah, that's how you cheat in Unreal Engine 5 and you modify materials to your liking. Okay, so I think we are good to go. Again, just save your project. Let's move on to the next part, which is going to be this one right here. So for this, what I'm going to do is that we can probably try adding a marble material to this again. Now, for some reason, I really like marble materials, and whenever I get the chance, I'm going to add a marble material to everything in my scene. Nope, not that one. Okay, so I think the UV unwrapping is not done properly in this scene, in this mesh, so that's why the textures are not coming properly. But I think I'm just gonna leave that. Okay, never mind. So I'm simply gonna be applying something like a wood material to this. So let me just go to wood. I think something like that looks pretty good. Maybe we can add a darker material to this. Yeah, so this wood material is pretty dark. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be actually making it lighter. Something like that I think should be good. And we can probably increase the normal intensity to make it a little more rough. About 5. I think that looks really nice. Okay, perfect. So yeah, again, one thing which I'm going to be doing with this as well is that I'm going to be reducing the saturation of this because it looks very reddish. It looked very reddish, and now it's fine. Yeah, perfect. So one thing which you might be noticing right now is that this whole scene looks a little washed out. It looks like as if there's very less contrast in this scene. But we're going to be fixing that in just a bit, so don't worry about that. I think that should be good. And yeah, I said we are going to be adding some books later on, and for that I'm just going to go to add Quixel content. You're going to search for books, and well, you're going to find a lot of these books. Some of them are going to be more old school, medieval style books, and some of them are not going to be, some of them are going to be more modern. Anyways, so yeah, for some reason it asks me to log in, and when you open Megascans for the first time, it does ask you to log in, so I'm just going to do that. All right, so I just signed in, and now I can just download all these. So I did already download some of them, so I'm just going to be importing those to save time. But I mean, I would recommend you to add more books, add more variation to these books, and yeah, just do whatever you want. I think let me just place one right there. Let me just reduce the camera speed so that I can move my camera more precisely. I can place them more precisely as well. So I'm just going to be rotating them like that. I would not recommend you to rotate them exactly 90 degrees because obviously in real life nothing is perfect. So I would recommend you to actually have some non-uniformity and just some randomness to your scenes. That should be good. Let me just move down here, and so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding one of these books like that, and let me just add one of these on top of this, and I'm going to be duplicating this one, and let me just rotate them. Something like that looks pretty good. Now obviously it does look a little repeated because we have two blue books right here and we have two of those floral books right there. So I would highly recommend you to actually, in your own scene, I would recommend you to sort of add more variation and add more books because that's just gonna look more realistic. Let me just move them right there. Okay, perfect. Let me just increase the camera speed to 2, and I think our living room is basically good to go, isn't it? This top part is left, so I'm going to be adding sort of a metal material to this. Maybe something more reflective. Nope. Something like that should be good. Okay, perfect. Right, so our scene is looking pretty realistic. Now let's move on to this lamp right here. So for the stand of the lamp, I'm going to be adding something, maybe even a brushed material, metal material. Now you're going to see this texture does not look that great because it's obviously it's brushed. I think that something like that looks a lot better. Or does it? Let me just select all these and let's move them up. So yeah, so one problem which we're facing right now is that the pivot point is the actual anchor point of this object is way too far, and we can't actually get close up and make precise movements. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Alt on my keyboard and the middle mouse button of my mouse, and then I'm just going to drag this right there. Now this is a way to temporarily move your anchor point of an object. That's just a useful tip for you. I'm just going to move it slightly up so that we're having more shadows. Yeah, that looks a lot better. That looks a lot more realistic. Okay. So I think something like that should probably be good. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it right there. And let me just add let's just add a simple, I think something like that should be good. Yeah, let's just add a simple fabric material to this. That should be good. I'm not going to bother with this bulb. However, you can obviously add an emissive material to this. Let me just add that because why not? However, it's not going to make that big of a difference because we are actually going to add a separate light to this. So I'm just going to be duplicating this one. Press Alt on your keyboard and just move it in the X and Y axes. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be placing this light inside of this lamp. So yeah, something like that should be good. All right, it looks pretty good. And one thing which we have to do is that we have to firstly reduce the source radius to keep it inside obviously this lamp. And secondly, what I'm going to do is that I was thinking of actually reducing this the intensity, but I think it's honestly fine. Just press G to go into game mode and try to see how it looks. I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, so now moving on to the next problem which we're going to fix, and that problem is that the scene looks very washed out and it has absolutely no contrast. But before that, let me just apply a metal material to these. It's these feet. To those as well. And I think we're good. All right, so what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to go inside my post-process volume. And in here, what I'm going to do is that firstly, I'm just going to go down to global, these color grading global settings, and we can just simply increase the contrast to something like 1.3. That you can see immediately looks a lot better. One problem which we are noticing right now is that the scene looks a lot darker for some reason. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to be increasing. Let me just close this. I'm going to be going up and I'm going to be increasing the exposure compensation to something like 16 maybe. 16 is way too much. 15.5 I think should be good. Yeah, so that looks a lot better and it looks a lot more realistic. However, now one thing which I would like to do is I'm just going to reduce the intensity of this to 0.1. And yeah, I think it looks pretty realistic and in my opinion, it looks pretty good. Okay, now if I just go back to the actual contrast, 1 second, global. If I just decrease it, you're going to see it looks very washed out and looks very unrealistic, doesn't it? And if I just turn it on, it automatically looks a lot better. You can obviously play around with the contrast. However, going very high with the contrast is going to make your scene look very unrealistic. In fact, I would recommend you to actually, if it looks oversaturated, I would recommend you to actually reduce the saturation. But in our case, I think it looks pretty fine. Okay. So our living room is basically done for now. We are going to be coming back to this. Yeah, one thing which I forgot to do was to add a reflective material to this TV. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to add let me just add a mirror material to this. But the problem with this is that it's basically not acting like a TV. So we can probably add something like that, but that has way less reflections. So I'm just going to open this material and I'm just going to be reducing the roughness maximum to 0. Because obviously TVs aren't rough, they're pretty shiny. We can probably increase it to 0.1. Never mind, I'm just gonna make it 0 because we want those reflections obviously. Yeah, so now it actually looks like an actual TV and perfect.